Hi, my name is Dusty and I'm going to read to you because I love to read and I thought it would be a great way to share. And if you want to have little ones that would like to listen to it, they're more than welcome to. If you're older and want to listen to it, so be it, because I love reading. So to me, it doesn't matter if it's a specific genre as far as like, oh, that's for preschoolers. I'm still interested, especially if the artwork's cool. So hopefully you'll find it cool. Well, this is my kitty Lenny, who's being Snoopy and just likes to be where I am usually because he's my buddy. Anyway, the book I'm going to read from is The Complete Brambly Hedge by Jill Barklam. I had not heard of it until some friends of mine from It's a Charming Life, Lindsay and Jonas had shared that they'd went to an estate sale and found some Brambly Hedge dishes, which I thought sounded amazing. And she mentioned the books and I was intrigued. So I got the book and I thought I would start with the summer story. So there's the beginning of the summer story. A little kitchen with a little mouse. And I believe her name is Poppy. So here we go. It was a very hot summer. Each day the sun rose high in the blue sky and the fields shimmered in the heat and the hedgerow was quiet. Many of the mice preferred to stay inside with their shady cottages, trying to keep cool. Out of doors, the best place to be was down by the stream. The mice gathered there in the afternoon and sat under the banks of the shade and dangled their paws and tails in the clear water. So there they are down at the stream in their little cottage, trying to stay cool. So cute. On the banks of the stream were flour and dairy mills, and the flow of the water turned the wheels which ground the flour and churned the butter for Brambly Hedge. Poppy Eyebright looked after the dairy stump. She supervised the large vat into which milk, kindly given by some friendly cows, was poured and stored. The many kitchens where cheeses were drained and shaped and smoked and wrapped were also in her care. So there's her great big flour mill where she's getting all the things that she needs to make cheeses and to have dairy and to process it all. It looks pretty complicated to me. I just like going to the store and getting my flour. Poppy was not fond of hot weather. I would agree. Her pats of butter began to melt unless they were wrapped in cool dock leaves, and the pots of cream had to be hung in the mill pool to keep them fresh. When her work was finished, she would wander out by the mill wheel, enjoying the splashes of cool water. And the flour mill further down the stream was run by a miller, Dusty Dogwood. Dogwood was his family name, but he was called Dusty because he was always covered from tail to whiskers with flour dust. Just like that's my name, Dusty. But it's not because I'm covered with flour. It's just because that's my name. He was a cheerful, friendly mouse like his father, and his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, who had all run the mill before him. He loved the fine weather and strolled up and down the stream chatting to the paddlers and the dabblers. His walk took him past the dairy, where he would often see Poppy standing by the stream, looking very pretty. As the long hot days went by, Dusty used to spend more and more time walking up to the dairy. And Poppy used to go out more and more often to the mossy shadows of the mill wheel. Early in June, Miss Poppy Eyebright and Mr. Dusty Dogwood officially announced their engagement, and everyone along the hedgerow was delighted. So there's some silly mice resting and playing, but there's the engagement for the sweet couple. Midsummer's Day was picked for the wedding, and the preparations were started at once. Poppy was so sure the weather would hold that they decided the wedding should take place on the stream. It was the coolest place, and besides, it was very romantic. Dusty found a large flat piece of bark up in the woods, which a party of mice carried down to the water's edge. It was floated with some difficulty just under the mill weir, and tethered in midstream by plaited rush and nettle ropes. Poppy prepared her trousseau. Every afternoon she sat in the shade of some tall kingcups, embroidering her wedding dress, which she hid as soon as she saw anyone coming along the path. And there she is, sewing away. I bet her dress will be super pretty. The wedding day dawned at last. The sky was clear and blue, and it was hotter than ever. The kitchens of Brambly Hedge were full of activity. Cool summer foods were being made. There was cold watercress soup and fresh dandelion salad, honey creams, syllabubs, and meringues. Syllabubs is a nice, like creamy, almost like jello-y type of dessert dish salad. Because when I hear salad, I think, lettuce and stuff like that. But a syllabub was more like, kind of like the jello marshmallowy salads. So I'm sure it's pretty tasty. I've never had one, butt. The young mice had been up early to gather huge baskets of wild strawberries. Basil selected some white wines, primrose, meadowsweet, and elderberry, and hung them cool in the rushes. Basil was in charge of all the cellars under the store stump. He was a stout, good-natured mouse with long white whiskers and a sensitive nose for fine wine. So there's the kitchen with all the activity and the sweet treats and yummies. And there's their best strawberries, and there's Basil with all of his selected wines. In her rooms above the dairy, Poppy dressed carefully. She polished her whiskers, dabbed rosewater behind her ears. Her straw bonnet, which Lady Woodmouse had trimmed with flowers, hung from the bedpost, and her bridal posy lay waiting on the windowsill. She peeped at her reflection in the shiny wardrobe door and took a deep breath and ran down the stairs to join her bridesmaids. Wow, look at her pretty dress. And there's her nice little room, but look at all the details she put in there with her sewing under the flowers. Dusty kept his best suit in a basket under the stairs to protect it from the moths. He put it on and tucked a daisy in his buttonhole. I'd better just check the barley I ground yesterday, he said to himself, and he ran up the steps at such a pace that the whole mill seemed to shake. The wooden floor above him let down a cloud of dust all over his new wedding suit. Bother it, he said, sitting on a sack of corn and looking at his mottled jacket in dismay. There was a thumping on the door below, and his friend Conker called through the letterbox. Dusty, are you ready? It's nearly time to go. Dusty sighed and went morosely down the stairs. As soon as Conker saw him, he began to giggle. Dusty by name, dusty by nature, he said, trying to remedy matters with his clean handkerchief. And flowery dust swirled and settled again on the whiskers and tails and best clothes and buttonholes. And the two mice looked at each other and started to laugh. They laughed so much that they had to sit down on a flour bag to recover. So there he is in his fine little jacket, and oh no, the flour. And there they are, just dusting up a cloud and laughing about it even more. The wedding was to take place at midday, and Dusty and Conker arrived just in time. The guests were all in their finest clothes. 3 young mice dressed in smart blue suits had been chosen as pages and were busily directing everyone to their places. Miss Apple discreetly tried to dust down the groom and the best man, but to no avail. At last, Miss Eyebright, Poppy's grandmother, spotted the bride and her little bridesmaids coming through the grass, and the pages squeaked with excitement and got into place. Every head turned to watch the bride as she made her way through the buttercups and stepped onto the decorated raft. So there they are, and there's Grandma Eyebright trying to dust them off, and there's the whole wedding party. Isn't that just beautiful? I would love to visit a wedding like that. How lovely. The old vole who had been asked to perform the ceremony stood up and said in his kindly voice, Poppy Eyebright, do you love Dusty? I think I've missed it. No, that's the next page. It felt like I missed a page. So back to the page. He stood up in a kindly voice. Poppy Eyebright, do you love Dusty Dogwood, and will you love him and care for him forever and ever? Poppy vowed that she would. Dusty Dogwood, do you love Poppy, and will you love her and look after her forever and ever? I will, said Dusty, and Miss Apple blew her nose. Look at the wedding party, goodness. All the guests, and a beautiful tent, and the cake. So lovely. Then in the name of the flowers in the fields and stars in the sky, and the streams that flow down to the sea, and the mystery that breeds wonder into all these things, I pronounce you mouse and wife. And all the mice cheered as Dusty kissed his bride, and the bridesmaids threw baskets of petals over the happy couple, and Miss Apple wiped a tear from her eye, and the dancing feast began. First they danced, for no one could keep still, jigs and reels and quadrilles. Mr. Apple proposed a toast, to the bride and groom, may their tails grow long and their eyes be bright, and all the squeals be little ones. And the guests raised their glasses, and then the dancing began, and the dancing was so vigorous that the raft bobbed up and down. Grabbing the ropes holding the raft began to wear through, and one by one the little ropes snapped until the last one gave way. Look at the bride and groom. Isn't she fancy in their treats? And there they are a-dancing. So much activity. They were carried into midstream by the current, and the young mice squeaked with alarm at first, but as soon as they came to come to no harm, they continued with the feast. And the raft floated gently past fields of buttercups and meadowsweet, and the voles tending the fires and the pottery came out to wave as the wedding party drifted by. Wow, and look at that house. It kind of reminds me of Winnie Pooh and the 100-Acre Woods. And there they are on their little raft floating down the stream. Eventually the raft was caught in a leafy clump of rushes, and forget-me-nots and ropes were made fast, and the dancing began again. That is quite the party. Look at that. All those people. Looks like a fun time. At last the dusk came, golden and misty over the fields, and the blue sky slowly darkened, and the mice began to think about getting home. And all the food was finished up, and the pots and pans hidden into the rushes to be collected the next day. They walked back through the fields in the evening sun, looking very splendid in their wedding clothes. The old vole was taken back to his hole first, and the rest of the mice gradually made their way home to bed, exhausted but happy. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't show a picture, because every page has a picture, but look, there's their sunset, and all the party getting ready to disperse. Just that happy golden hour. And what happened to Poppy and Dusty? They slipped quietly away to the primrose woods, and the primroses were over, but there, hidden amongst the long grass and ferns and wild roses and honeysuckle, was the cottage in which they'd chosen to stay, and it was the perfect place for a honeymoon. So there they are on their new little place. And even though it's not autumn, we can read that next. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it.